The blood on her deerskin dress had dried to a dark rust color by the time Marshal Thomas Garrett found her collapsed beside the stream, her face burning with fever and her breathing shallow as winter wind. He had been tracking a stolen horse for 3 days through the rugged terrain of eastern Washington Territory, following prints that led him away from Spokane and into the wild country where few white men ventured in the spring of 1878. The horse meant little to him now as he knelt beside the woman, noting the bullet wound in her shoulder and the infection that had spread its poison through her body. She was Apache, he could tell from her clothing and the traditional patterns woven into the leather, though what had brought her so far north from her homeland he could not guess. Marshal Garrett was 28 years old, tall and lean from years of hard living, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He had seen enough death in his time to recognize when it was approaching, and he knew this woman would not survive another night exposed to the elements without help. The decision came quickly, born from something deeper than duty. He lifted her carefully, feeling the heat radiating from her skin, and carried her to where his horse stood grazing. The ride back to his cabin took 4 hours, with the woman drifting in and out of consciousness against his chest. She murmured words in her own language, sounds he could not understand but which carried the weight of pain and fear. He held her steady, one arm wrapped around her waist while the other guided his horse through the darkening forest. His cabin sat in a clearing 10 miles outside Spokane, a simple structure he had built himself with timber from the surrounding woods. It was modest but sturdy, with a stone fireplace and 2 rooms that suited his solitary life. He had left the marshal's office in town that morning never expecting to return with a dying woman, but life in the territories had taught him to expect nothing and prepare for everything. Inside, he laid her on his bed and set about building up the fire. The cabin grew warm as he heated water and gathered what supplies he had for treating wounds. His hands were steady as he cut away the blood-stiffened leather around her shoulder, revealing the angry red flesh where the bullet had entered. The wound had festered, and he knew he would need to clean it thoroughly if she had any chance of survival. She cried out when he poured whiskey over the wound, her dark eyes flying open for a moment before consciousness left her again. He worked quickly, removing debris and dead tissue, then packed the wound with a poultice made from herbs he kept for such purposes. A trapper had taught him the recipe years ago, claiming it had saved his life more than once. Marshal Garrett could only hope it would work now. The fever raged through the night. He sat beside the bed with a bowl of cool water, repeatedly dampening a cloth and pressing it to her forehead, her neck, her wrists. Her skin felt like sun-baked stone, and she thrashed weakly, speaking in rapid bursts of Apache that grew more desperate as the hours passed. He did not know if she was reliving whatever violence had brought her to this state, or if she was calling out to loved ones far away. "Easy now," he said softly, holding her shoulders when the movements threatened to reopen her wound. "You are safe here. I mean you no harm." Whether she understood his words or simply responded to his tone, she quieted slightly, her eyes finding his face in brief moments of clarity. They were beautiful eyes, he noticed despite the circumstances, dark and deep with flecks of gold that caught the firelight. She could not have been much older than 25, with strong features and long black hair that spilled across his pillow like a raven's wing. Dawn came gray and cold, filtering through the single window in pale shafts. The fever had not broken. Marshal Garrett forced water between her lips drop by drop, knowing dehydration would kill her as surely as the infection. She swallowed reflexively, though most of the water ran down her chin. He wiped it away gently and tried again. The second day passed much like the first. He changed the poultice twice, encouraged by the fact that the wound looked slightly less angry each time he examined it. The fever remained high, however, and she grew weaker. He spooned broth into her mouth, made from dried beef and wild onions, and was relieved when she managed to swallow some of it. That evening, as he sat beside her in the gathering darkness, she opened her eyes and looked directly at him. For the first time, there was recognition there, an awareness that had been absent before. "Water," she whispered in English, the word barely audible. He lifted a cup to her lips and supported her head while she drank. She took several small sips before falling back against the pillow, exhausted by even that small effort. "Where am I?" Her English was accented but clear. "My cabin. 10 miles outside Spokane. I found you by a stream 3 days ago. You were shot." She lifted her hand slowly to her shoulder, feeling the bandage there. "I remember. White men, they wanted." She paused, breathing heavily. "They wanted things I would not give." Anger stirred in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "They are gone now. You are safe. Why did you help me?" Her eyes searched his face with an intensity that made him look away. "Because you needed help. No other reason is necessary." She studied him for a long moment before her eyes drifted closed again. "My name is Ohana Kade, Marshal Thomas Garrett, though you can call me Thomas if you prefer." "Marshal," she repeated, and he thought he detected a hint of wariness in her tone. "I am not here to harm you," he said firmly. "I give you my word on that." She did not respond, already slipping back into fevered sleep. But he took it as a good sign that she had been lucid enough to speak, to ask questions. Perhaps she would survive after all. The fever broke on the 4th night with a violence that frightened him. She convulsed and cried out, her body racked with chills despite the heat still burning through her. He piled blankets on top of her and held her when the shaking grew too severe, whispering words of comfort he hoped would reach her through the delirium. Her teeth chattered so hard he feared they might crack, and sweat poured from her skin in streams that soaked through the bedding. Then near dawn she went still. For one terrible moment he thought she had died, but when he pressed his fingers to her throat he felt a pulse, steady and strong. He laid his palm against her forehead and nearly laughed with relief. The skin was cool, damp with sweat but no longer burning. The fever had broken at last. She slept peacefully through the morning and into the afternoon, her breathing deep and regular. Marshal Garrett took the opportunity to step outside for the first time in days, tending to his horse and checking his traps. The spring air smelled of pine and fresh growth, and the sun felt good on his face. He had not realized how exhausted he was until he stood in the daylight, blinking and stretching muscles grown stiff from sitting. When he returned to the cabin an hour later, she was awake and sitting up slightly, leaning against the pillows he had stacked behind her. Color had returned to her cheeks, though she still looked weak and thin. "You should rest," he said, setting down the rabbits he had retrieved from his traps. "I have been resting for days, I think." She watched him move about the cabin, her expression guarded. "How long have I been here?" "This is the 5th day. You were very ill." "Thank you for caring for me. I know many white men would not have done the same." He met her gaze directly. "I am not like many men. I am beginning to see that." She shifted slightly and winced, her hand going to her shoulder. "The wound?" "Healing well, though it will leave a scar. You were fortunate. Another day and the infection might have been beyond treatment." "Fortune is a strange word for being shot and left to die." "Fortunate that I found you," he clarified. She nodded slowly. "Yes, that was fortunate." He prepared the rabbits for cooking, skinning them with practiced efficiency while she watched. He found himself acutely aware of her presence, of her eyes following his movements. It had been a long time since he had shared his space with another person, and he was surprised to find he did not mind it. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "I can make stew." Yes, very hungry. He set about preparing the meal, chopping wild carrots and potatoes he had stored in his root cellar. The work felt different with her watching, more purposeful somehow. He seasoned the pot with salt and herbs, letting it simmer over the fire until the meat was tender and the vegetables soft. When he brought her a bowl, she accepted it gratefully, though her hands shook with weakness. He helped her hold it steady while she ate, noting how she tried to hide her trembling. Pride, he thought. She did not want to appear weak. "It is good," she said between bites. "Thank you. You need to rebuild your strength." She nodded, focusing on the food. He left her to eat and took his own bowl to the table, giving her space. They ate in comfortable silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the soft scrape of spoons against bowls. When she finished, she set the bowl aside and looked at him thoughtfully. "Why do you live out here alone? Spokane is not so far. Why not live in the town? I prefer the quiet, and I can do my work just as well from here." "Your work as marshal?" "Yes. I patrol the territory, keep the peace when I can. And when you cannot, I do what is necessary." She was quiet for a moment. "The men who shot me, will you go after them? Do you know who they were?" "No, just drifters, I think. They saw a woman alone and thought." She trailed off, her jaw tightening. "I fought them. I had a knife. I managed to cut one before the other shot me." "Good," he said, surprising himself with the vehemence in his voice. "I hope you hurt him badly." Her expression softened slightly. "I think I did. If they come through Spokane, I will deal with them. But tracking them now would be difficult. The trail is old and the spring rains have washed away most signs." "I understand. I do not ask you to avenge me. I am alive, and that is enough." He nodded, though privately he hoped he would encounter the men someday. The thought of them attacking a lone woman, leaving her to die, filled him with a cold rage he rarely allowed himself to feel. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Marshal Garrett continued his patrols during the day, though he kept them shorter than usual, never ranging too far from the cabin. Ohana grew stronger slowly, her body healing from the trauma it had endured. She began to move around the cabin by the end of the first week, though she tired easily and often needed to rest. He found himself looking forward to returning home each evening, to finding her sitting by the fire or preparing simple meals from his supplies. She insisted on helping despite her weakness, and he did not have the heart to refuse her. He understood the need to feel useful, to not be entirely dependent on another's charity. They talked in the evenings, sharing stories of their lives. She told him of growing up in the mountains of Arizona Territory, of learning to track and hunt from her father, of the traditions and ways of her people. She spoke matter-of-factly about the hardships her tribe had faced, the forced relocations and broken promises, the violence and injustice that had become commonplace. "We were moved to a reservation 3 years ago," she said one night, staring into the fire. "My father refused to go. He said he would die free or not at all. The soldiers killed him for his defiance. I am sorry. Sorry does not bring him back. Sorry does not change what was done." Her voice was bitter. "But I know you did not do these things. I do not blame you for the actions of others." "What happened after your father died?" "My mother had died years before. I had no other family. I went to the reservation for a time, but I could not stay. It felt like dying slowly, so I left. I have been wandering for 2 years now, moving north to get away from the soldiers, from the memories." "That is a hard life for anyone, let alone a woman alone." "I am not helpless," she said sharply. "I survived for 2 years before those men found me. I can hunt, track, defend myself. Being a woman does not make me weak." "I did not mean to imply that it did. I only meant that the world is dangerous and being alone increases those dangers for anyone." She softened slightly. You are right, I apologize. I am too quick to anger sometimes. No apology needed. You have earned the right to be angry. In turn, he told her of his own past. Of growing up in Missouri. Of losing his parents to cholera when he was 15. Of drifting west in search of something he could not name. He had worked as a ranch hand, a hunter, a scout for the army, before finally settling in Washington Territory and accepting the marshal's badge 3 years ago. "Do you like the work?" she asked. "It is necessary work. I am good at it. Whether I like it is less important. That is a lonely way to live. I have been lonely for a long time. I suppose I am used to it. Being used to something does not mean it is good." Her words stayed with him after she went to sleep, curled up on his bed while he took his usual place on a bedroll by the fire. He stared at the ceiling, listening to her soft breathing, and wondered when exactly his life had become so small and solitary. He had told himself he preferred it this way, that he worked better alone, but her presence in his cabin had awakened something he had long buried. The space felt less empty with her in it, the silence less oppressive. By the second week, Ohana was moving around with much more ease. The wound in her shoulder was healing cleanly, and though it still pained her, she no longer needed his help with basic tasks. She began to venture outside during the day, walking around the clearing and exploring the immediate area around the cabin. One afternoon, he returned from checking his traps to find her skinning a rabbit she had caught herself. She looked up at him with unmistakable pride. "I could not let you feed me forever," she said. "I needed to contribute. You did not need to, but I appreciate it nonetheless." She smiled, and he was struck by how it transformed her face. She was beautiful when she smiled, a fact he had tried very hard not to notice over the past days. It seemed inappropriate somehow, given the circumstances of their meeting and the power imbalance inherent in their situation. But he could not help noticing, could not help the way his heart beat faster when she looked at him, or the warmth that spread through his chest when she laughed at something he said. He was developing feelings for her, he realized with no small amount of alarm. Real feelings, deeper than simple attraction. He tried to push the thoughts away to focus on practical matters. She would leave soon, he told himself. Once she was fully healed, she would want to move on, to continue her wandering. She had no reason to stay with a solitary marshal in a cabin in the woods. Better not to let his feelings grow any stronger. But as the days passed, she showed no signs of wanting to leave. She settled into life at the cabin as though she had always been there, making small improvements and adjustments that he found himself grateful for. She organized his supplies, mended his clothes, and began tending a small garden plot beside the cabin, planting seeds she had found in his stores. "You do not have to do all this," he said one evening, watching her patch a hole in his spare shirt. "I know, but I want to. You saved my life, Thomas. Let me do this for you. You have already thanked me. You do not owe me anything. This is not about owing. This is about wanting to help." She set down the shirt and looked at him seriously. "Do you want me to leave? Have I overstayed my welcome?" "No," he said quickly, perhaps too quickly. "You have not. You are welcome to stay as long as you wish. Good, because I like it here. I like the quiet, the peace. I like." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "I like your company," his heart hammered in his chest. "I like yours as well." Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been building since she first opened her eyes in his bed. The air felt charged, heavy with possibility and uncertainty. She stood and crossed to where he sat by the fire. "Thomas." "Yes. May I sit with you?" he nodded, not trusting his voice. She sat close enough that their shoulders touched, and he could smell the wood smoke in her hair, the herbal soap she had used to wash. They sat in silence, watching the flames dance, and he felt more content than he had in years. I do not want to leave, she said quietly. I know I should. I know I am disrupting your life, but I feel safe here. I feel like I have found something I did not know I was looking for. You are not disrupting anything. If anything, you have made this place feel like more than just a cabin. You have made it feel like a home. She turned to look at him, her dark eyes searching his face. Do you mean that? I do. These past weeks, having you here, it has reminded me that there is more to life than just existing. You have brought light to this place. You brought me back from death. You cared for me when no one else would have. You treated me with kindness and respect when the world has shown me so little of either. Her voice grew thick with emotion. How could I not want to stay with you? He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek in his palm. She leaned into the touch, her eyes closing briefly. Ohana, he said softly, I need you to know something. My feelings for you, they are not just gratitude or obligation. I care for you. More than I should, perhaps. More than is wise given how little time we have known each other. But I cannot deny it any longer. Then do not deny it. She covered his hand with hers. I feel the same. From the moment I first saw you clearly, when the fever had broken enough for me to truly see you, I felt it. You are a good man, Thomas Garrett, a rare thing in this world. He leaned forward slowly, his heart pounding, and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, tentative, a question more than a statement. She answered by wrapping her arms around his neck and pulling him closer, deepening the kiss until he felt dizzy with want and joy and a dozen other emotions he could not name. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered. Please stay with me. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I will stay. The weeks that followed were the happiest Marshal Garrett could remember in his adult life. They settled into a partnership that felt natural and right, dividing the work of maintaining the cabin and the land around it. Ohana proved to be an excellent hunter and tracker, skills she had learned from her father and honed during her years of wandering. She taught him Apache techniques for moving silently through the forest, for reading signs in the landscape that he had missed before. In turn, he taught her to read and write English, which she had never learned properly. They spent evenings by the fire with a slate and chalk, her brow furrowed in concentration as she practiced forming letters. She was a quick learner, determined and focused, and within a month she could read simple passages from the few books he owned. Why did you never learn before? He asked one night. No one ever offered to teach me. And on the reservation, they wanted us to forget our own language to become like white people. I refused. But learning from you is different. You do not want me to forget who I am. You just want to give me another tool. Exactly. Your language and culture are precious. I would never want you to lose them. She smiled and kissed him softly. This is why I love you. The words hung in the air between them, and he saw the moment she realized what she had said. Her eyes widened slightly, but she did not take it back. You love me? He asked, hardly daring to believe it. Yes, I love you, Thomas. I love you too, he said, the words feeling both terrifying and inevitable. I think I have loved you since I first found you by that stream, though I did not recognize it then. They made love that night for the first time, a slow and tender joining that left them both trembling. He was careful of her shoulder, which was still healing, and she guided him with gentle touches and whispered encouragement. Afterward, they lay tangled together in his bed, her head resting on his chest as he stroked her hair. I never thought I would have this, she murmured. I thought I would wander alone forever. You never have to be alone again. I promise you that. Summer arrived in full force, bringing long days and warm nights. The garden Ohana had planted flourished, providing them with fresh vegetables to supplement their diet of game and preserved goods. They worked side by side, weeding and watering, and he found himself marveling at how seamlessly she had integrated into his life. His trips to Spokane became less frequent. He still maintained his duties as marshal, but he found ways to accomplish much of the work closer to home. The town council did not seem to mind. Crime had been relatively quiet that summer, and he had always fulfilled his obligations faithfully. On one of his trips to town in early July, he stopped by the general store to purchase supplies. The proprietor, a genial man named Henry Walsh, greeted him warmly. "Marshal Garrett, good to see you, getting your monthly supplies." "Yes, though I need more than usual this time." Henry raised an eyebrow. "Building up your stores for winter already. It is a bit early for that." Thomas hesitated, then decided there was no point in being secretive. "I have someone living with me now. I need to plan for 2 people instead of 1. "Is that so?" Henry's expression was curious but not judgmental. "Anyone I might know? I doubt it. Her name is Ohana. She is Apache." To his credit, Henry did not react with the prejudice Thomas had half expected. "Well, good for you. A man should not live alone if he can help it. What does she need?" They spent the next hour selecting fabric for new clothes, additional cooking supplies, and various other items Thomas thought Ohana might like or need. Henry threw in a small mirror as a gift, saying every woman should have a proper mirror. When Thomas returned to the cabin that evening, laden with packages, Ohana greeted him at the door with a kiss that made him forget his tired muscles and the long ride. "You were gone longer than usual," she said. "I was beginning to worry. I had shopping to do, for you." Her eyes lit up as he unpacked the supplies. She exclaimed over the fabric, running her hands over the soft cotton and sturdy denim. The mirror delighted her, and she laughed at her own reflection, making faces like a child. "This is too much," she said, but he could see the pleasure in her eyes. "It is not nearly enough. I want to give you everything, Ohana." She set down the mirror and came to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You have already given me everything that matters, but I will not lie and say these gifts do not make me happy." That night as they lay in bed, she asked him about his trip to town. "How did people react when you told them about me?" "I only told Henry Walsh at the store. He was fine with it. But others will find out eventually, and some will not be fine with it." He knew she was right. There were people in Spokane and throughout the territory who held deep prejudices against native peoples. But he also knew that his own reputation carried weight, and he was prepared to use it. "Let them talk. I do not care what they think. You are my woman, and anyone who has a problem with that will have to go through me." She was quiet for a long moment. "Your woman. Is that what I am, if you want to be?" He propped himself up on one elbow to look at her. "I know we have not talked about this properly. Everything has happened so quickly. But I want you to know my intentions are serious. I am not playing at this. I want you with me permanently. As your wife." The word hung between them, heavy with implication. He had been thinking about it for weeks but had been afraid to bring it up, worried it was too soon, that she might feel pressured. "Yes," he said finally. "As my wife. If you would have me." She rolled over to face him, her expression solemn. "Marriage between us would not be recognized by your government. I am Indian. You are white. The law does not allow it in many places. I do not care about the law. We can have our own ceremony, our own commitment. We do not need a piece of paper to make it real. You would do that. Bind yourself to me without legal recognition. I would bind myself to you however you wanted. Legal, traditional, both, neither. The method does not matter. Only the commitment does." Tears glistened in her eyes. "Then yes. Yes, I will be your wife, Thomas Garrett. In whatever way we can make it true." They married themselves under the stars a week later, speaking vows they had written themselves. There was no priest or witnesses, just the two of them and the vast night sky overhead. Ohana wore a dress made from the fabric he had brought from town, which she had sewn herself in a style that blended Apache and white traditions. He wore his best clothes, cleaned and pressed for the occasion. They spoke in both English and Apache, Ohana teaching him the words he needed to know. They exchanged simple rings he had fashioned from silver, melting down coins and shaping them with tools borrowed from a blacksmith in Spokane. The rings were crude but beautiful in their simplicity, and Ohana cried when he slipped hers onto her finger. "I am yours," she said, "and you are mine. For all the days we have left in this world. For all the days," he repeated, "and whatever comes after." They consummated their marriage that night with a passion and tenderness that left them both exhausted and elated. In the morning, waking with her in his arms, Thomas felt a contentment he had never known. His life, which had seemed so complete in its solitude, had been revealed as hollow. Now, with Ohana beside him, it felt full and rich and worth living. The summer passed in a blur of happiness. They worked together, hunted together, explored the surrounding wilderness together. Ohana knew plants he had never noticed, pointing out edible roots and herbs with medicinal properties. She taught him to make traditional dishes from her childhood, adapting the recipes to use ingredients available in this northern landscape. He, in turn, taught her the skills he had learned as a lawman. How to shoot his rifle and pistol accurately, though she proved to already be a better shot than him. How to read legal documents and understand the laws of the territory. How to navigate the complex social structures of white society, not because she needed to become part of that society, but because understanding it gave her power. They talked long into the nights about everything and nothing, about their pasts and their hopes for the future, about the injustices they had witnessed and the small ways they could resist them, about building a life that honored both of their heritages. In August, Ohana began to feel ill in the mornings. At first, they both worried the infection had returned, but it quickly became clear this was something else entirely. When her monthly bleeding did not come, they looked at each other with dawning realization and joy. "A baby," she said, her hand going to her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." Thomas felt as though his heart might burst. "Are you happy?" "Yes, are you?" "Happier than I have ever been." They made plans immediately. The cabin would need to be expanded before winter. They would need supplies for a baby, cloth for diapers, a cradle, more warm blankets. Thomas threw himself into the work with enthusiasm, adding a second bedroom to the cabin and reinforcing the walls against the cold that would come. Ohana insisted on helping despite his protests, working beside him until he finally convinced her to focus on sewing and preparing baby clothes instead. She sat outside in the shade during the warm afternoons, her hands busy with needle and thread, humming songs her mother had taught her. As her belly began to swell with their child, Thomas found himself falling even more deeply in love with her. She was radiant, glowing with health and happiness, and he could not imagine a more beautiful sight. He talked to her belly in the evenings, telling their unborn child stories and promises for the future. "You think it will be a boy or girl?" Ohana asked one night. "I do not care either way. As long as the baby is healthy and you come through the birth safely, that is all that matters to me." "I want a boy," she said. "A son who can grow up free and strong, who does not have to fear what I have feared. We will do everything in our power to give our children that freedom." "Children?" She looked at him with raised eyebrows. "You plan to have more than one, if you are willing." "I always wanted a big family." She laughed and took his hand, placing it on her stomach where he could feel the baby moving. "Let us get through this one first." In late September, Thomas made one of his periodic trips to Spokane. He needed to check in with the town council and purchase supplies before winter set in. The trip had become somewhat routine, but this time felt different. People stared at him as he walked down the main street, and he heard whispers following in his wake. At the town council office, he found Mayor James Reynolds waiting for him with a stern expression. "Marshal Garrett, we need to talk." Thomas felt a chill of apprehension but kept his voice level. "What about?" "There have been concerns raised about your living situation. People are saying you have an Indian woman living with you. Some say you have married her. My private life is my own business. Not when you are a representative of this town. The council is worried about what message it sends to have our marshal living with a savage." Thomas felt rage flood through him, but he forced himself to speak calmly. "That woman is my wife, and she is no savage. She is more civilized than half the people in this town. She saved my life in ways you could not understand, and I will not hear her spoken of in such terms." Mayor Reynolds leaned back in his chair, his expression calculating. "I understand you have feelings for this woman, but you must see how this looks. We have had trouble with Indians in the past. Having you associated with one undermines your authority. Then you can have your badge back." Thomas unpinned the star from his vest and set it on the desk. "I will not choose between my duty and my wife. If the council cannot accept her, then I no longer wish to serve." The mayor looked shocked. "Now, do not be hasty. We can work something out." "There is nothing to work out. Either you accept my marriage or I resign. Those are the only options." A long silence stretched between them. Finally, the mayor sighed. "Keep the badge, but understand that you will face criticism. Some people will not like this. Those people can speak to me directly if they have concerns." Thomas picked up the badge and pinned it back on. "Is there anything else?" "No. That is all." Thomas left the office with his head held high, though he was shaking with anger. The confrontation had been inevitable, he supposed, but it still stung. He had served this town faithfully for 3 years, and they were ready to cast him aside over his choice of wife. He completed his errands quickly, wanting to return to Ohana as soon as possible. At the general store, Henry Walsh greeted him warmly. "I heard about your meeting with the mayor." "The whole town has heard by now." "Good. Let them talk. For what it is worth, I think you are doing the right thing. Your wife is lucky to have a man who will stand up for her." "I am the lucky one." Henry helped him load his supplies, and Thomas noticed the man added extra items to the pile. "What is all this?" Thomas asked. "Just some things for the baby. Consider it a gift from me and my wife. We are happy for you both." Thomas was moved by the gesture. "Thank you, Henry. That means more than you know. There are good people in this town, Marshal. Do not judge us all by the narrow minds of a few." The ride home felt longer than usual. Thomas was eager to see Ohana, to tell her about what had happened, and to reassure himself that she was well. As he rode into the clearing, he saw her standing outside the cabin, and his heart lifted. She waved and came to meet him, her belly round under her dress. "You were gone so long," she said. "Did something happen?" He told her about his meeting with the mayor as they unpacked the supplies. She listened quietly, her expression growing troubled. "You should not have risked your position for me," she said when he finished. "I did not risk anything I was not willing to lose. You are more important to me than any job. But it is your livelihood. How will we survive without your marshal's pay? We will manage. I can hunt and trap. Maybe hire on as a guide or scout. We will find a way." She wrapped her arms around him as best she could with her belly between them. "I love you for standing up for me, but I worry about what this means for our future. Our future will be what we make it. As long as we are together, everything else will work out." He tried to sound more confident than he felt. In truth, he was worried about money and how they would manage. but he pushed the thoughts aside. They would face those challenges when they came. Winter arrived early that year, bringing snow in November that blanketed the landscape in white. Thomas spent his days hunting and trapping, building up their stores of meat and pelts. The pelts could be sold in the spring for cash, which would help them get through until he found other work. Ohana grew larger, her movements slower and more deliberate. She tired easily but refused to stop working entirely, insisting on cooking and sewing and keeping the cabin tidy. Thomas hovered over her like a worried mother hen, which made her laugh. "I am not fragile," she said. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. That does not mean I will not worry. Worry if you must, but do not try to stop me from living. I need to feel useful." In December, as the days grew short and the cold deepened, Ohana began to have pains. They were irregular at first, coming and going without pattern. But on a frigid night when the wind howled around the cabin, the pains became regular and intense. "The baby is coming," she said, her voice tight with discomfort. Thomas felt panic grip him. "It is too soon. You are not due for another month. Babies come when they are ready, not when we expect them. Help me to the bed." He did as she asked, his hands shaking. He had delivered foals and calves, even helped a trapper's wife once when there was no other option, but this was different. This was Ohana, the woman he loved more than his own life and their child. "I need you to be calm," she said, gripping his hand during a contraction. "I need you to be strong for me." He took a deep breath and nodded. "Tell me what to do." She instructed him between contractions, her knowledge of childbirth coming from watching other women in her tribe. He boiled water and gathered clean cloths, built up the fire until the cabin was almost too warm. He supported her when she wanted to walk, held her hand when she needed to rest, wiped the sweat from her face with a cool cloth. The labor lasted through the night and into the morning. Ohana was strong and brave, biting back cries of pain and focusing on the work her body was doing. Thomas felt helpless and awed in equal measure, watching her bring their child into the world with a determination and courage that left him humbled. Finally, as dawn light filtered through the windows, the baby came in a rush of blood and fluid. Thomas caught the tiny form in his hands, marveling at the perfect fingers and toes, the shock of dark hair. The baby was small but seemed healthy, and after a moment of terrifying silence let out a strong cry. "A boy," Thomas said, tears streaming down his face. "We have a son." Ohana laughed weakly and reached for the baby. Thomas placed him on her chest and she cradled him close, cooing softly in Apache. The baby quieted at her voice, turning toward her instinctively. "He is beautiful," she whispered. "Perfect." Thomas cleaned them both gently, cutting and tying off the cord as Ohana had instructed, wrapping the baby in a soft blanket. The afterbirth came a few minutes later, which he disposed of outside in the snow. When he returned, Ohana was nursing the baby who had latched on with surprising strength for one so small. "What should we name him?" Thomas asked, sitting beside them on the bed. "My father's name was Na," she said, "but I want him to have a name from your culture as well. Something that will help him move through both worlds." They discussed it while the baby nursed and then slept. They wanted a name that was strong but not harsh, traditional but not old-fashioned. Finally, they settled on Matthew Na Garrett, a name that honored both their heritages. "Matthew," Thomas said, testing it out. "Matthew Garrett, it suits him." "Our son," Ohana said softly, "our beautiful boy." The first weeks with Matthew were exhausting and wonderful. He was a hungry baby, waking every few hours to nurse, and Ohana grew thin and pale from the demands of feeding him. Thomas did everything he could to help, changing soiled cloths, walking with Matthew when he fussed, keeping the fire going so the cabin stayed warm. Winter deepened around them, but inside the cabin, there was warmth and life and love. Thomas had never been happier despite the lack of sleep and the constant work. Watching Ohana with their son, seeing the tender way she cared for him, made his heart overflow. As Matthew grew, his personality began to emerge. He was a quiet baby, rarely crying without reason, but alert and watchful. His eyes, which had been dark blue at birth, began to shift toward brown, though they seemed to hold flecks of gold like his mother's. "He has your eyes," Thomas said one afternoon, watching Matthew track his movement across the cabin. "And your stubborn chin," Ohana replied with a smile. "Look how he sets his jaw when he is displeased." Spring came slowly, the snow melting in fits and starts. As soon as the trails were passable, Thomas made a trip to Spokane with his winter's worth of pelts. The money from selling them would help them get through the next few months, but he knew it would not be enough long term. He needed to find work. At the general store, Henry Walsh offered him a solution. "I have been thinking," Henry said. "My back is not what it used to be, and I could use someone to help with deliveries and heavy work around the store. It would not be full-time, but it would be steady money." "Interested, very interested." "Thank you, Henry." "No need to thank me. You would be doing me a favor. Can you start next week?" "Yes, I will need to make arrangements for Ohana and the baby, but I can make it work." The job was not glamorous, but it paid honestly and kept Thomas close enough to home that he could check on his family during the day. He hauled crates, made deliveries to outlying ranches, helped customers load their wagons. The work was physically demanding but satisfying, and Henry was a generous and understanding employer. Some people in town still looked at Thomas with disapproval when they learned about his marriage, but many more were kind and accepting. They asked about his family, inquired after the baby, treated him with the same respect they always had. It reminded Thomas that goodness existed alongside prejudice, and that building bridges was always possible for those willing to try. Ohana occasionally came to town with him when the weather was good, carrying Matthew in a cradle board she had made in the traditional Apache style. The sight of her always drew stares, but she held her head high and ignored the whispers. Thomas was proud of her courage, her refusal to hide or be ashamed of who she was. One day in late spring, as they were walking through town, a woman approached them. She was middle-aged, dressed simply but neatly, with kind eyes and graying hair. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Marshal Garrett and his wife?" "We are," Thomas said cautiously. "My name is Sarah Mills. My husband and I run the church on the edge of town. I wanted to introduce myself and to say that you are welcome to attend services if you wish. We believe all are welcome in God's house, regardless of their background." Ohana looked surprised. "That is very kind of you. It is only right. I know some in this town have not been welcoming. I wanted you to know that not everyone feels that way." She looked down at Matthew sleeping peacefully in his cradle board. "Your son is beautiful. May God bless your family." After she left, Ohana was quiet for a long moment. "I did not expect that, neither did I, but it is nice to know we have allies. Perhaps we should attend her church sometime. It would be good for Matthew to learn about both our beliefs." "I would like that." They returned to the cabin that evening feeling lighter somehow, as though a weight had been lifted. The world was not as hostile as they had feared. There was kindness to be found, acceptance to be earned. Their family might be unconventional, but it was strong and loving and real. Summer arrived with warmth and abundance. The garden flourished, providing them with vegetables to eat fresh and preserve for winter. Thomas's work at the store continued steadily, and he even picked up occasional guide work for hunters and travelers wanting to explore the territory. Money was still tight, but they managed. Matthew grew rapidly. his little body filling out and becoming strong. He began to smile and laugh, to reach for objects that caught his attention. Ohana sang to him in Apache, teaching him the language of her people alongside English. Thomas read to him from his small collection of books, wanting to instill a love of learning. "He will grow up knowing both worlds," Ohana said one night. "He will be stronger for it. He will grow up knowing he is loved. That is the most important thing." As autumn approached and Matthew neared his first birthday, Thomas and Ohana began to discuss the future more seriously. They wanted more children, they agreed, but should wait at least another year so that Ohana could recover fully from Matthew's birth. They talked about eventually expanding the cabin further, maybe even building a proper house with multiple rooms. "I want to give you everything," Thomas said. "A real home, security, a good life. You have already given me all those things. This cabin is a real home because we fill it with love. We have security in each other. Our life is good because we are together. I just wish I could provide more. You provide everything that matters. Do not measure our wealth by money or possessions. Measure it by happiness, by love, by the family we are building. By those measures, we are rich beyond imagining." He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her body against his. She was right, he knew. They had everything that truly mattered. Matthew's first birthday arrived in mid-December, on a day when fresh snow covered the ground in a pristine blanket of white. They celebrated simply, with a special meal and a small toy horse Thomas had carved for him. Matthew clutched the horse in his chubby fists and gnawed on it happily, while his parents laughed and took turns holding him. "1 year," Ohana said wonderingly. "It seems impossible. It feels like just yesterday I was holding him for the first time." "And also like he has always been with us," Thomas added. "I cannot remember what life was like before him." "It was quieter," Ohana said with a laugh. As winter settled in again, they fell into comfortable routines. Thomas split his time between his various jobs, always making sure to return home each evening to his family. Ohana kept the cabin running smoothly, caring for Matthew and maintaining their supplies. They spent their evenings together by the fire, talking and reading and playing with their son. In February, Ohana told him she was pregnant again. This time, the news came with less surprise but equal joy. They had hoped for another child but had not been actively planning. Yet here it was, another life beginning, another blessing to add to their growing family. "How do you feel?" Thomas asked, his hand resting on her belly which had not yet begun to show. "Happy, excited, a little nervous about having 2 small children to care for. We will manage, we always do. This pregnancy was easier than the first." Ohana knew what to expect, and her body recovered from the birth of Matthew seemed to handle the changes with less difficulty. She was still sick some mornings, still tired more easily, but overall, she felt well and strong. Matthew, now walking and getting into everything, kept them both busy and entertained. He was a curious child, always exploring, always wanting to touch and taste and examine everything he encountered. Ohana followed him patiently, redirecting him when necessary, marveling at his energy and enthusiasm for life. "He has your adventurous spirit," Thomas said one evening, watching Matthew toddle around the cabin with his toy horse. "And your stubbornness. See how he keeps trying to reach that shelf even though it is too high for him." Thomas laughed and scooped up his son, lifting him high so he could touch the shelf. Matthew crowed with delight, his little hands patting the wood before Thomas set him down again. "Our children will be strong and brave," Ohana said. "They will need to be to make their way in this world. They will be loved. That is what matters most." Spring came again, bringing the miracle of renewal. The land greened, flowers bloomed, and animals emerged from their winter dens. Ohana's belly grew round with their second child, and Matthew seemed fascinated by the changes in his mother's body. He would pat her stomach gently, as though he could feel his sibling within. "Baby," Ohana would tell him, "you are going to be a big brother." Matthew did not fully understand, but he seemed to grasp that something important was happening. He became more affectionate, wanting to be held and cuddled more than usual, as though storing up attention before his monopoly on it ended. In September, 3 years after Thomas had first found Ohana by the stream, their second child was born. This labor was quicker than the first, and by afternoon they were holding a healthy baby girl with a full head of dark hair and lungs that announced her presence forcefully. "A daughter," Thomas said, absolutely besotted from the first moment he saw her. "She is perfect." "What should we name her?" Ohana asked, tired but radiant. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their daughter's tiny face, Thomas knew exactly what felt right. "What was your mother's name?" he asked. "Itza." "Then let us honor her memory. Our daughter should carry her name." Tears filled Ohana's eyes. "You would do that?" "Give our daughter an Apache name, even though it will make her life harder. She is Apache as much as she is white. She should be proud of both heritages." "Itza Rose Garrett, what do you think?" "I think it is perfect." "Thank you, Thomas." Matthew was confused and slightly jealous of the new baby at first, but his parents were patient with him. They made sure to give him plenty of attention, to include him in caring for his sister. Soon he was the doting big brother, bringing Itza his toys and patting her gently when she cried. The cabin that had once housed only Thomas now rang with the sounds of family. Baby cries and toddler laughter, conversations between husband and wife, the ordinary chaos of domestic life. Thomas had never imagined such happiness existed, and he thanked whatever forces had led him to that stream 5 years ago. As the children grew, Thomas and Ohana made sure to teach them about both cultures. Ohana told them stories from Apache tradition, taught them phrases in her language, showed them traditional crafts and skills. Thomas read to them from books, taught them about white society and its structures, prepared them to navigate a world that might not always be welcoming. "They will face challenges," Ohana said one night when the children were asleep. "People will not always accept them. They will be caught between two worlds." "They will also have twice the strength," Thomas countered. "They will understand things others cannot. They will be bridges between cultures." "I hope you are right. I hope the world becomes a place where they can thrive. We will do everything in our power to make it so." Years passed in a blur of joy and work and occasional struggle. Money was always tight, but they managed. The children grew healthy and strong, developing distinct personalities. Matthew was serious and thoughtful with his mother's observant nature. Itza was bold and adventurous, afraid of nothing. When Matthew was 6 and Itza 4, Ohana discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news was met with mixed emotions. Another child would strain their already limited resources, and the cabin was already crowded. But they welcomed the new life nonetheless, trusting they would find a way to manage. Their third child was born in the spring of 1885, another boy they named Adam. He was a quiet baby, content to observe the chaos of his older siblings with calm brown eyes. His arrival forced them to finally expand the cabin more significantly, adding a loft where the older children could sleep. Thomas took on more work to support their growing family, sometimes gone from dawn until well after dark. He hated being away from Ohana and the children, but he was determined to provide for them as best he could. His reputation as a reliable, Honest worker helped him find opportunities, and slowly their financial situation improved. By the time Adam was 2, Thomas had saved enough money to make a significant purchase. He bought 20 acres of land adjacent to their cabin, giving them room to expand and perhaps even start a small ranch. It was not much, but it was theirs, and it represented security for their children's future. "We are landowners," Ohana said wonderingly, looking out over their property. "I never imagined such a thing. This land belongs to our children as much as to us. It is their inheritance, their birthright." They built a proper house on the land, larger and sturdier than the cabin had been. It had 4 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and even a small parlor. The children were thrilled, racing through the empty rooms and claiming spaces for themselves. Moving into the new house felt like the culmination of everything they had worked toward. Thomas stood on the porch on their first night, looking out over the land they owned, and felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had built something real, something lasting. His children would grow up with opportunities he had never had. Ohana joined him on the porch, sliding her arm around his waist. "We have come so far from that day by the stream. Best day of my life finding you there. Best day of mine too, though I did not know it at the time." She looked up at him. "I love you, Thomas. Thank you for giving me this life. You gave it to me as much as I gave it to you. We built it together." As the years continued to pass, their family remained close-knit and loving. The children grew into capable young people who moved easily between white and Apache worlds, just as their parents had hoped. Matthew showed an interest in law and justice like his father, while Itza excelled at hunting and tracking like her mother. Adam, the youngest, had a gift for working with animals and dreamed of having his own ranch someday. Thomas and Ohana aged together gracefully, their love deepening with each passing year. They still celebrated their wedding anniversary under the stars each summer, renewing the vows they had spoken all those years ago. They still talked late into the night, sharing their thoughts and dreams and fears. When Matthew turned 18 and prepared to leave home to study law in Seattle, Thomas felt a strange mixture of pride and sadness. His firstborn son was becoming his own man, ready to make his way in the world. "Take care of your mother and your siblings," Thomas told him the night before he left. "I will, Father, but you are not going anywhere yet. You are still young." "I am getting older, we all are. I just want to make sure you know how proud I am of you. I know, you have told me my entire life." Matthew embraced his father tightly. "I hope I can be half the man you are. You will be better. You have advantages I never had. Use them well." After Matthew left, the house felt emptier, but life continued full and rich and meaningful. Itza took over more of the hunting and trapping duties, proud to contribute to the family income. Adam worked with their small herd of cattle, expanding it slowly but steadily. Thomas reduced his work hours as his joints began to ache and his stamina waned. He spent more time at home, helping Ohana with the endless tasks of maintaining their household and land. They often sat together in comfortable silence, watching their children work, marveling at how quickly the years had passed. One evening in the fall of 1893, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Ohana took his hand. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Giving up your position as marshal, the respect you had for me?" "Never, not for a single moment." He squeezed her hand. "You gave me a life worth living. You gave me love and family and purpose. How could I possibly regret that? We have been blessed. We have been. More than I ever dreamed possible." The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, and in the distance, they could hear their children's voices as they finished their evening chores. Thomas felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. This was what mattered. Not wealth or position or reputation, but this. love and family and home. As darkness fell, they went inside to the warm house they had built together. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Their children gathered around the table for dinner, talking and laughing, full of life and energy. Thomas looked at Ohana across the table, saw her smile at something Adam said, saw the love and contentment in her eyes. She met his gaze and smiled at him, that same beautiful smile that had captivated him so many years ago. In that moment, Thomas knew with absolute certainty that he had lived a good life. He had loved and been loved in return. He had raised children who would make their mark on the world. He had built something lasting and true. The years that followed brought the natural progression of life. Matthew established himself as a respected lawyer in Seattle and married a kind woman who accepted his mixed heritage. Itza married a rancher's son and settled nearby, giving Thomas and Ohana their first grandchildren. Adam eventually bought his own land and started his own ranch, fulfilling his childhood dream. Thomas and Ohana grew old together, their hair graying, their bodies slowing. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by decades of shared experience and mutual support. They knew each other completely, anticipating needs and desires without words. When Thomas was 65 and Ohana 62, they celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren. The house overflowed with family. 3 generations gathered to honor the couple who had started it all. Matthew stood to give a toast, raising his glass high. To my parents, who taught us that love transcends all boundaries. Who showed us that courage means standing up for what you believe in, even when the world says you are wrong. Who built a family and a home through sheer determination and devotion. May we all be so blessed. Everyone raised their glasses, voices echoing in agreement. Thomas felt tears sting his eyes as he looked around at all the faces, all these people who existed because he had made the choice to save a dying woman by a stream 40 years ago. "I want to say something," Ohana said, standing beside him. Her voice was still strong despite her age, carrying to every corner of the crowded room. "When I was young, I thought I would wander alone forever. I thought the world had no place for me, that I would live and die without ever truly belonging anywhere. Then Thomas found me. He saved my life, yes, but more than that, he gave me a reason to live. He gave me love and family and home. Everything you see here, everyone gathered in this room exists because of his kindness and courage. I am grateful every single day for the life we have built together." She turned to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "I love you, Thomas Garrett. I have loved you from the moment I first truly saw you. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." Thomas stood and gathered her into his arms, holding her close while their family applauded and cheered. He pressed his lips to her forehead, breathing in her familiar scent, feeling the solid warmth of her body against his. "I love you too," he whispered, "always and forever." The party continued late into the night, filled with laughter and stories and music. Their grandchildren played together, the oldest chasing the youngest, their joy infectious. Thomas and Ohana sat together, watching it all, their hands intertwined. As the evening wound down and family members began to depart, promising to visit soon, Thomas and Ohana finally found themselves alone again. They stood on the porch, watching the last wagon disappear down the road. "That was wonderful," Ohana said. "It was. I am exhausted, but it was worth it." They went inside and prepared for bed, moving through the familiar routine with practiced ease. When they lay down together, Ohana curled against his side, her head resting on his shoulder. "Thomas. Yes, thank you. For what? For everything. For saving me all those years ago." for loving me, for giving me this beautiful life. You saved me too, you know. I was just surviving before you came along. You taught me how to truly live." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Promise me something, anything. Promise me that when I am gone, you will not mourn too long. That you will remember the joy we shared, not the pain of loss. Ohana, promise me, Thomas. I need to know you will be all right. Only if you promise me the same, I promise. Then I promise too." They fell asleep holding each other, secure in the knowledge that whatever time they had left, they would face it together. The years that remained to them were good ones. They watched their grandchildren grow, welcomed great-grandchildren, and saw their family tree expand in ways they could never have imagined. They celebrated birthdays and holidays, mourned losses and celebrated triumphs, lived fully and completely. Thomas died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, with Ohana beside him. He simply did not wake one morning, his heart having given out during the night. Ohana held his hand and wept, grieving the loss of her partner, her love, her best friend. But she did not mourn long, as she had promised. Instead, she focused on celebrating the life they had shared, on being present for their children and grandchildren, on living fully for as long as she had left. She told stories about Thomas to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive through words and laughter. She remained active and engaged, continuing to hunt and work until her body finally forced her to slow down. Ohana lived 3 more years after Thomas's death, dying at the age of 65 surrounded by family. Her last words were in Apache, a prayer of thanksgiving and a declaration of love for the man who had saved her, and then spent 43 years loving her completely. They were buried side by side on their land, beneath a large oak tree they had planted together decades earlier. Their children erected a simple marker that bore both their names and a single line: "They loved completely." The land and house passed to their children, who maintained it carefully, preserving the legacy their parents had built. The story of Thomas and Ohana became family legend, passed down through generations, a testament to the power of love to transcend all boundaries. Their great-great-grandchildren still visit the graves under the oak tree, bringing flowers and spending quiet moments honoring the couple who had started it all. The story of the marshal who saved an Apache woman and then refused to let her go, and the woman who loved him so fiercely she refused to leave his side, continues to inspire and move those who hear it. In the end, Thomas and Ohana's greatest legacy was not the land they owned or the house they built, but the love they shared and the family they created. They proved that love knows no boundaries of culture or race, that courage and compassion can overcome prejudice and fear, and that 2 people who choose each other completely can build something beautiful that lasts far beyond their own lifetimes. Their story, born from a moment of kindness by a stream in 1878, rippled forward through time, touching countless lives and reminding everyone who heard it that love, true love, is the most powerful force in the world. It can heal wounds, bridge divides, and create families that span generations. It can transform loneliness into belonging, wandering into home, and mere survival into a life worth living. And so the story of Thomas Garrett and Ohana Kade lives on, a testament to what is possible when 2 people choose love over fear, acceptance over prejudice, and commitment over convenience. They built a life together that was rich and full and meaningful, and in doing so, they created a legacy that would last forever.